Hey everybody, Eric here. This is my second live stream. So I've also got Jody with me as my, what would you call it, a VJ? Jody, what do you call yourself?
uh, Guy Friday or Ed McMahon. I don't know. I'll take anything. Just don't call me stupid.
My comic relief. I think I refer to Jody as the king of puns, so that's why I'm glad to have him because we were missing that with my last live stream. Was we were a little pun shy, pun
Right?
short. Yeah,
We were not punchy enough.
yeah. We didn't we didn't punt the way we needed to. So let me take a couple minutes to describe what our goal is here, because when I'm invited to do live streams or skill builders or live presentations, I like to put my spin on things, which is a little bit different. In this case, it's what we said that this is like an assemblage or a compiling. What we're going to do today is we're going to try to split our time. It's a little bit ambitious. I'm going to try to split our time between working straight in SketchUp, which is going to be doing a combination of modeling stuff from scratch, using some extensions, using some native tools, finding some things from 3D Warehouse or other sources online, importing things that are maybe objects or something that we purchased that came from sources outside of SketchUp formats like OBJs, working with materials. And then what we're going to do ultimately is the goal is to bring all of this stuff into SketchUp so that then we can set up a scene. The way that I think about it is like just dressing a set. So we're going to pick a camera angle. We're going to arrange the objects in a way that they're going to work to tell the story that we want to tell. And the story that we picked for today is one I've done before, which is why I felt comfortable and I thought excited, kind of fun to do it again, which is to try to recreate the Dagobah Swamp landing scene. So not Yoda's house for anybody who wants to see Yoda. Unfortunately, it's we're going to be doing the swamp landing where Luke kind of crashes in and it's misty and you've got some weird creatures buzzing around and things like that. So
If you keep the ship under the water, it'll be perfect. You won't even have to model that. It'll keep your rendering time will be super fast and everything.
actually, an even easier way to do it would just be to kick the fog setting up really high in V-Ray, and then that way you don't see anything at all, except for
All you
maybe,
do is
yeah, then you don't have to model
maybe
anything in the background.
perfect.
So, Jody, if you're ready, and if everyone is that you see, unless there's any comments or questions or concerns before I actually get to it, because I'm trying to model and render in the same time in our little 2 hour window, I would like to get to it. I'm also going to try not to talk quite so much. I do like to say, what I'm doing, but at the same time, I also want to give Jody a little bit more of a chance to jump in and contribute and ask questions and things like that, sort of represent the
Don't you
viewers.
worry about me. I'll talk over you whenever I want to be heard.
Please do, please do. And if I go over something too quick and you want to see it again or you need to explain why, I like to try to explain why I did something, but if that obviously please interrupt me at any time. So I've got
Okay.
my little cheat sheet here. Before I get started, I'm going to actually, you know what? I'm just going to get started. I'm going to shrink my head if that's okay. Let's do this.
Do it.
Do it. Ready? Watch. And okay, so I don't want to say cheated, but I did pre-think this process and I didn't want to spend 20, 30 minutes looking for assets. So when I start a project like this, what I'll usually do, I'll actually do two things. The first thing I do is I look at some reference images. So I think that we all kind of remember, and correct me, this is from Empire, right, Jody? This is where he goes. This is right after the beginning scene when he takes off after the snow fight on Hoth, and then he takes off. Luke goes off by himself, and then
Yeah,
goes
talk about
to visit Yoda.
you got you got to wonder how well he packed for that. Leaving Hoth, had all kinds of cold weather clothes, and then all of a sudden he's in a murky, hot swamp.
Yeah,
I don't know. You must have really big storage areas for all your clothes and luggage on those ships.
we'll have to have a different podcast for just critiquing movies with you and I. But for me, I always think that they never eat, and I whenever I see them stop to eat in a film, I'm like, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense because you just got done fighting a battle, and you're now you're going to be probably in
Yeah,
in your spaceship for what could be a week or so, or at least a day.
they're
Anyway,
out there, and they're never carb loading for any of these things. You got to figure using the
no.
force has got to be fairly. But yeah, we're just getting off in the weeds there. We're in
But
the whatever these kinds of trees are called.
The weeds. We're in the swamps. So with this one here, I want to stop on this one because this one was important because what we're trying to do is create something from outer space. But unfortunately, unless we're modeling everything from scratch, which we don't have time to do, I just said we don't have time to do, we're going to have to draw from things literally that we have here in real life. So the closest thing I could find to sort of these tree roots that you find in Dagobah that are kind of sticking out of not only the water but of the ground would be the bald or the swamp cypress that you might see something in Louisiana or in the American southeast, excuse me. And I thought, okay, well then let's take what we know and what we have access to here, and then let's combine it with some other things in order to create something unique. So I just want to say that's my starting point. I need Luke, I need R2, I need an X-Wing, I need water, I need some sort of ground plane or terrain that has some undulation to it, some movement to it. I need some roots, and I need some gigantic trees that are kind of creepy and cool looking. So anything else? I think that should be enough to get us started.
That should be it.
That should be it. All right. So that's the context to where I start. So when I start looking for things, when I start gathering things, like I look at that image and I say, okay, what are we going to do here? So I'm going to say, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but if we really wanted to, we could talk a little bit about 3D Warehouse, because I do find that when I search for things on 3D Warehouse, I'm just going to type in really quick, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, so just hang with me for a second. If I type in X-Wing, like you would imagine, 332 results. So it's going to be tough to sort of figure out what's that right level of detail. If I clicked on one like this, I would say probably not. The render could be for a low poly or a cartoon style render, that could work. But then I remember looking at one earlier, and I can't remember where it is now, but that's okay. You'll have to just trust me. If I click on it and I look at one and say, oh, it's 50 megabytes, and it's got, I can't remember which one it is. Okay, 50 megabytes. If I add this in, it's really going to already start to bog my model down. I haven't even started. I just have one asset. So the first thing I do is try and balance that level of quality and level of detail so that I feel like what we're using is going to work. Which one was the one? Nope, these are all actually pretty good. So unfortunately, they're not. I can't find the big one, but you get the idea. I also find sometimes you have to go, as much as I love 3D Warehouse, as much as we all love 3D Warehouse, sometimes you got to go outside of 3D Warehouse. I found on Sketchfab this bald cypress, and I thought, well, this could be actually pretty cool. And they let you download the 3D model. The only thing is that it downloads it in a format that is going to be that SketchUp that's going to require an extension. So we'll come to this later, because there's another thing I want to show you too about bringing in really cool assets that are maybe not from 3D Warehouse. So they're not in an SKP format. So just letting you know, look other places, but keep in mind you might be getting it in a non-SketchUp format, and that's going to require just that extra step.
Do you know, Eric, if they have different usage rights than the 3D Warehouse when you go to Sketchfab?
That's a good question. I think what you do is you just double check. Most of these ones are, as long as you're not reselling it, that the biggest thing, as long as you don't resell their asset, you're usually okay to use it in your artwork, because it falls within the Creative Commons sort of use license. But that's a great point. Check it first, right? Because if someone says, this is my model, you cannot use this for anything, maybe find a different one. But most of the time, as long as you're not reselling the asset, you're safe.
Okay. Yeah, I see on that one it says CC attribution for Creative Commons.
Well, and I'm using it. Actually, that's a good point, because I'm using it. So I'm going to give this person, which is Baptiste Berard, I'm going to give them credit. They said, well, they posted the model. I used it. Give them credit. There you go. So what we're going to do is we're going to now say I've got some assets arranged, and I'm going to start from scratch. So I'm going to create a completely blank model. And I have a cheat sheet here just in case. If I get stuck for any reason, I like to put a cheat sheet in as a watermark. And what's cool about that as a watermark is that I can basically make sure that, that we're kind of we're staying on time and on task. So the first thing I talked about was this idea of locating and compiling and listing all of the assets that you need to do a render or a story like I'm doing right now. So I've got the X-Wing Luke R2, a swamp cypress, a dead tree, and then some roots that I've got from Megascans. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a little bit when I actually go to start to compile or assemble my scene. So that takes us to, once we've kind of gathered all those things, you don't have to necessarily do it the way I'm doing it. I'm kind of OCD where I do it all in advance, or I do most of it in advance. But obviously there's no reason why you can't just go and grab things as you go, as the need arises. So the next thing we need to do is the next thing or the first thing is that we need a ground plane for these to sit on. So I'm just going to give myself a starting point of 200 by 200 feet. It's kind of arbitrary. Yeah, got to make sure it's 200 feet by 200 feet, not 200 inches by 200 feet.
Yeah, she's a giant woman.
Yes, exactly. So in this case, I'll just start always, well, not always, but most of the time, start by giving it a, grouping it. So this is where we're going to use some extensions. So as much as I would love to, where is my Artisan? Oh, this is where what we're going to do is we're going to do some sculpting. I love sandbox tools. I love native tools. Don't get me wrong. I'll try to use them for the most part as my first option. Artisan, disabled, apply changes. There we go. But if there is something that works a little bit faster, and even if it comes at a cost, I'm always going to try and explore an extension just to see if that works. So I know that teaching though is hard because we don't want to assume that everyone has a budget, unlimited budget and things like that. So I do understand for a lot of you that, extensions are sort of maybe out of your budget, but I like to at least touch on it a little bit. So with Artisan, it's got this cool tool that subdivides. So kind of like the opposite of doing a grid mesh using sandbox tools. Because what we want is a terrain that we can start to manipulate. That's what we're going to do first is sculpt. And again, I'm going to try and pause after I kind of explain. So Jody, you can chime in. What I'm going to do is I have to figure out how much detail I want. So the more subdivisions I do, the tighter the mesh becomes. And of course, the more triangles, which means you're going to get a much smoother, finer terrain. But of course, that adds details to the model as well. It adds geometry. So I've got to balance out sort of what I think is the right amount. I'm going to do one more and hope that that's not too much. So once you see that little... Are you trying to be truthful to the original Star Wars stuff, or are you just going to kind of wing it as far as what you feel like a swamp feels like? I'm going to X-wing it, actually. See?
Nice.
Yeah, I know.
You don't need me for puns.
Yeah, I know. What I want to do is I need something big enough that I feel like I did the 200 by 200 because you need something big enough to feel like the scale-wise, an X-wing sitting in a swamp water, right? So that's all it is. I'm totally winging it. So what I need to do now is this is still a flat plane. All I did was subdivide it. So what we need to do is depress it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy first, though. And the reason I'll show you why, it's not a component, but I want to copy and I want to set that aside because one part is where the swamp goes down, and then the edges around the swamp might actually have some undulation. So that might be a little bit different than what I'm doing here. So let's just set aside. It's always a good idea to have a copy, and then that way if you don't need it, kind of like Tyson, right? Doesn't he like work with a bunch of stuff off to the side?
Yeah, that's Tyson's MO.
So this yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I guess it'll probably shake out, but do you tend to leave everything out and just do the terrain first, and then you start bringing assets in once you've got your round done?
Yeah, because unfortunately, those assets that I did find, some of them are kind of high poly, and they have really high quality textures associated with them. So if I do bring them in now, I would tag them and turn them off. But because I'm not there yet, because I'm already thinking ahead, but I'm not there technically in the process. If I was starting from scratch, I might not bring them in quite yet. So let's get to it. I clicked this little red arrow. That's the sculpt brush. And it works a lot like the way that Smooth does with if you're used to the sandbox tools. Yeah, so what you can do is you can either select just a piece of it and you can sculpt just that piece. You can see I don't know if it's hard to tell, but I'm just clicking. So the thing I like about that is I'm just literally clicking with my left mouse button. And if I don't really care, if I want to sculpt everything, then I can just go ahead and I'm just clicking down. And if you press down on the arrow key, you're going to get you can see how that depression went much deeper. And if you press up on the arrow key, you're going to get that little red arrow is much shallower. So I'm going to get like a much smoother. And if I want to do a smaller depression, I just change the scale of my sculpt brush. And all I'm doing is just pushing the terrain down. It doesn't even really matter. It's just sort of enough that I've got what I think is going to be my lake. And if it's not perfect, my swamp. If it's not perfect, totally fine, because we can go in and adjust this at any time. It also has to be deep enough that, because we're going to be able to see through the water. So you want to kind of have a shallow part and maybe a deep part. But I think that's, what do you think? I think that's probably overkill. So when I turn, I'm going to apply a color to it just for right now, just because I think it makes it a little bit easier to see. And we're going to swap that color out later so you can kind of see the depression that's there. The next step is the water. So I'm going to press up as an arrow key to lock a rectangle to the blue axis. And I'm going to grab I'm going to group it. And then I need to move this. Right now you can see there's Z fighting, right? Because the water is sitting sort of on the same surface as the swamp is going to be. So I'm going to push that down. And you can see by pushing that solid plane down, I get to kind of choose how much of like a, what would you call that? Like a shoreline, like an edge. Oh, I should do an audio check, right? We had a little audio glitch last time. Is everybody doing okay this time?
No comments yet. So
no comments. Okay.
It's all working good.
Cool. So that's pretty much it. So I'm not rendering anything yet because there's really nothing quite to see, but there is, we have our water plane here and we have our terrain. This is also a good time that for those that know me from or watched our last session together, I am going to just tag. I automatically, as soon as I build something, I tag, and then I'm going to, this is going to help us a lot later as well, and you'll see why. So we have terrain and we have water. And the other thing I'm going to do is, as I make the tags, I'm going to change the colors because I like to do color by tag, because color by tag is what helps me see whether or not I placed it on the right tag or not. So in this case, my untagged, I'm just going to say, I'm going to put black as untagged. So anything that shows up as black in my model, it just means that it hasn't been tagged yet. So I'm going to grab this terrain and I'm going to pop that over to the terrain tag. It turns pink. If that's too intense.
Now you've said that a lot of times while you're working like this, that it actually carries over to, or it helps you, since you're going to be rendering right afterwards, it often shapes the way that you're actually modeling. Does your tag selection and your tag usage affect your rendering at this point, or?
No, not yet. But I can apply materials to tags. And so in some ways, if I have all my water on one tag, I can go later when I'm rendering, I just say apply to tag. And what it does is it'll apply that same water texture to everything on that tag. So in some ways, I'm just kind of setting that habit now, that good habit.
Okay.
All right.
Everybody is confirming audio is good.
Oh, good. Thanks, everyone. And I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do this at a little bit lower poly, which is I'm going to subdivide the terrain that instead of pushing down, I'm actually going to kind of sculpt this terrain to come up. So if you see a little beach ball, that's just because, when you're dealing with hidden geometry and subdivisions and stuff like that, it can get kind of complex. And fingers crossed, I don't have to do a start. Oh, I might have done too many on that one. That's probably why it was thinking I clicked one too many. All right, perfect. So what I'm going to do here, do I want to back out? Do I need that many? I don't think I need that many. Can I? Oh, I already did that. See? So Jody, I need you to help me out. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to switch over to the sculpt brush, and I'm going to start sculpting some of the terrain. Instead of going down, I'm going to go up. It doesn't really matter. This is kind of arbitrary. I'm setting my brush radius pretty wide at 25 feet. And let me see, where's my brush? There it is. So if you see here, it's, oh, that's weird. It's kind of giving me a hard time today. It's probably because I'm live. And when you're live, you know this, Jody.
It's Murphy's Law.
When you're live, it's like, oh, I've done this 100 times. But now that everyone's watching, it's like, it's not going to do it. So there it goes. For some reason, the first time it didn't like it. So all I'm doing is just kind of going around and I'm just kind of giving it some undulation just to kind of, so that when I go to do my render later, it just doesn't feel like it's sitting on a super flat. It just kind of makes it a little bit more interesting. And that I'm turning my hidden geometry on and off using a shortcut key. So if you see those lines come on, it's because I'm just using a shortcut key. Make that a component. And I'm going to line this up. And what I love about when you know what your camera angle, if you know what your camera angle is, I love that you can just model. What I do is model to my camera angle. So I already know that I'm going to be kind of looking this direction. So I'm not too worried about like if there's anything in the foreground that doesn't show up. So I'm just going to kind of copy that ground plane. I could have just made a really big ground plane, but yeah, it's okay.
Lawrence is reminding us it's time to save.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. So desktop, we're going to call this Dagobah, and I'm going to save it on my desktop. So thank you, everyone. So that's it for Artisan. Like a lot of cool tools, but I love extensions that have other features, and it's okay not to use all of them. Like it's okay just to be like, that's the thing that I like. I like to sculpt with Artisan. It's just a little bit more for me intuitive than the native sandbox tools. So
it
now
basically just looks like sandbox on steroids.
Yeah, a little bit. So now the next bit here is we're not ready to start adding materials quite yet. I think it'd be good to sort of set up our scene. So like I already said, I always have a person too in my scene, by the way, no matter what I'm doing, just because no matter where, because I always forget kind of the sense of scale. So even though this is just a placeholder person, I'll always kind of start with them so I know where the horizon is and I kind of know how sort of big the swamp is. So let's go ahead and start bringing some stuff over. So if I pop back over into my little pre-planning model here, the first thing, one thing I didn't tell you to do, and I always do, is you can see that when I imported the Luke and the R2-D2 from 3D Warehouse, if I scroll over to where they are, that they came with a bunch of tags. And so one thing I always remind people when I teach 3D Warehouse is open it up in a separate file, purge any tags or layers, and double check your hidden geometry. Make sure that you've cleaned it out so that it's, when you're ready to bring it into your model, looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and take these out, and I'm going to not delete them, but I'm going to put them on the untagged because obviously I don't want to delete them. I just don't want their tags to come in.
It's also always good to do that just so you can double check the scale, because not all models are created equal in the 3D warehouse for sure.
That's true. That's true, especially when you're dealing with different units. Sometimes you're lucky and it comes in perfect even if it's in different units. Other times you're not. So one thing we want to do is we want to make this look like it's crashed. So obviously I think the first thing to do is you can see I'm not worrying too much about where my rotation angle is. I just kind of need something close. If I needed it perfect, I would kind of do the rotation. I would use inferencing, but in this case, it's like, I'm okay if it's a little bit off because, he crashed, right? So you're not going to crash perfect. Did he crash? He did crash. He kind of crashed. He crash landed. He didn't crash.
He didn't.
Crash.
I mean, it wasn't like he lost control or anything. He just ended up in a bad spot.
Yeah. So here's where it gets tricky, where I think because of his wing, I can't show the X wing in the dirt. So in this case, I kind of have to probably want to show the wing part underwater. Either that, or what I would do is, if I was really being picky, and I don't know if this audience will entertain me, then this is a forgiving audience, isn't it? I love this audience.
Oh yeah, everybody's being quite forgiving. Yeah. Michael did have a good question, which might not matter a whole lot yet, but I was wondering if you raise the lowest depression of the mesh up to 0 elevation before you render shadows.
V-Ray doesn't care what elevation you're at because it doesn't have shadows on a ground plane, if I understood that question right.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, like in SketchUp, that's a good point. Depending on where your shadows are falling, they have a setting called shadows on ground, in which case, if you do a depression, you're going to see shadows cast above that depression, almost like floating shadows. But V-Ray doesn't recognize that. So that's why I tend to ignore it. So what I'm going to do is see how I said you can just sculpt it. So once you kind of start to assemble things, it's really fun because we can just come in here and say that wing should be in the water. So I'm just going to kind of pull the swamp back just slightly. And then you can see I'm using just like the lowest setting here so that I'm only pushing that depression down just a little bit. So that way that wing sort of sits more in the water. And if I switch to my not X wing, but X-ray mode, I can see that like half of that wing sort of sits within the water. That's pretty cool. So I don't think that's perfect, but let's call that. The other thing is you'll notice is that we have two R2s, one R2 in there. But if we go back to our little reference image here, and which one was it that I liked? There was, let's see here. If I go back to my reference image, there was this one here. This is really kind of the story that I feel like I'm telling. You can see that its nose is in the water. Luke has opened up the cockpit, and R2's kind of watching, concerned. He's a robot, so he probably shouldn't get too close to the water. And Luke's just trying to figure out, like, whoa, what the heck's going on? So that's kind of the story that I'm telling here. So I think in that case, we need to do two things: is we need to sort of adjust this so that it we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to lift the cockpit lid, and then we are going to take R2 out because we're going to put him somewhere else. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky because this is somebody else's model. And so if I go and select this cockpit lid, it's not, this is where it's like, it's not as much fun because it's like, you just have to see me kind of just doing maintenance, you know?
Yeah, well, and we've encountered in the past that a cockpit can be a very sticky point for some people. If it's not modeled right, it can push some buttons.
Yeah, so one thing I'll notice you'll see is that this whole thing actually shares, that it was modeled in a way, this is a relatively low poly model when I turn the textures off. It was modeled in a way that the cockpit wasn't intended to open. And so in that case, what it's doing is it's merging with the rest of the body. So I have to go in and add some extra lines. So then if I actually select, and I'm using my left select, okay. So what I'm going to do is group all of that together. So I created a new plane that ought to, if I did it correctly, and I want to do it from the hinge. If I did it right, it will lift up.
Aaron is calling you out on calling R2 a robot. He's actually a droid.
I know what R2 is.
And what we do know is that he can handle all kinds of stuff. He can handle sand. You can drop into the bottom of the swamp, and he just seems to just keep on chugging.
We got a problem with our droid, which is that he's sort of missing some components. So I don't think he's going to be able to handle much without his roller feet.
When I was a kid, we had these toys called Weebles. The slogan was "Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down," and they're literally all just little bean-looking things like that, with painted faces on the sides. That's a great toy. I don't understand why they're not around anymore.
Wait, what year was that?
Choking hazard.
I don't think I remember.
Yeah, you were probably still dead. Probably weren't even born yet.
Yeah, probably. We won't go there though, for our audience, to spare them. So I'm going to paste in, I deleted the R2 that doesn't have legs. And this is why this is what's kind of fun, is that I'm going to actually put him on. I'm going to say that you're right. I'm convinced. I'm sold. R2 is not afraid of water. He's willing to risk it. He's going to go out there and just sort of maybe sit with Luke. The same thing is I didn't model this, but luckily I found one that I think is built well enough that what I need to do is I need to take these two parts here, and I need to, here's a little trick for when you're working with really large environments like I am here. Sometimes you get that sort of jumpy camera where it sort of bounces around because you have a lot of information in your field of view. So sometimes what I'll do is when I'm working, and I'll just do this for fun, I'll set my field of view to 1. And that's a habit before they fix the clipping plane issue. If you did parallel projection, you'd get a clipping plane when you have a really big model. So I'd go to field of view 1, and it basically mimics parallel projection, but without the clipping plane. So then that way I can get really, really close and tight, and I don't have any of that sort of jumping camera that you would get, that you might expect. So fun fact. So we're going to move him this way. I should say it. I shouldn't assume. R2 has not told me their pronouns.
Yeah, that's true. I don't. I feel like they're always referred to as a him, but yeah, I really don't know.
Well, it is. I mean, if we wanted to, I don't want to get into debate about it because this is not the place. But I mean, if you're referring to the actor that plays R2, it is Kenny Baker, right? So you could say him. Right. You could say him only in that we're referencing the person who's inside. I hope that's okay.
The only thing I can say for certain is that as a droid, he is binary. He is not non-binary.
That's right. Well, he is written. Don't you think his software is written on binary?
Right. I think it's all binary. So there you go.
That was a code joke for those of you.
Yeah. Just going for nerd jokes.
Now, one thing I did was turn my axis off. So if you see me just kind of bounce around and play with styles or whatever, I am making sure that my hidden objects are not showing. And so view, hidden objects, I turn my axis off. When I'm working in environment stuff, I kind of tend to ignore the axis, even though, because once you start moving things around, it's like we're so off kilter anyway. So that's okay. So what did I say? Every time I add something, I tag it just right away out of good habit.
Good plan.
Yeah. Is that okay? That's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab
all the more reason to take your components into a different file before you bring them in here so that you can get your tags in order.
Get my tags. Yeah, get your tags in order. Oh, you know what I did? I accidentally selected the ground plane. So which is why it was showing when I was selecting tags, it was showing me multiple ones. So I'm going to go to Entourage and check it just to make sure I got that right. Ooh, it's kind of pretty. Oh.
Okay, so they're considering R2 to be quantum, not binary. So yeah, I guess he is non-binary. I'll allow it.
Quantum. What is that? Like quantum computing or quantum in a way that I'm not understanding it?
Quantum computing. I think
You mean?
Probably. He's got on, off, but he's also got an in-between state.
Okay. So let's go. He can run basically multiple processes simultaneously in real time.
Yeah.
Isn't that what that allows you to do? To be able to
I think so.
It's not linear.
I mean, I know that load lifters are binary, but I don't know really much about droids. Okay, or they at least speak load lifter language, binary load language.
Luke is out of scale. See, now you've lost me. Once you said binary load language, I'm just like, I started tuning. I just tuned out. So
I get that a lot. My wife tunes me out all the time.
So, okay, so we're doing okay on time, but we're just kind of thinking about the stage setup. I think this is probably a good time to set the camera angle because you want to do this pretty much. Let me change my field of view back to, let's say 45, something more natural like the eye would see, because now all of a sudden I have my main characters in the stage. You can already see that the X-wing itself is blocking R2. So that tells me that I either need to rotate the X-wing, move R2, or pick a camera angle, in which case I'm looking more at the X-wing, and not. So in which case, I got to kind of think about what's going to make a cool. What do you think? I wish that we could get a poll going. Where's Matt and his polls?
Matt might do a poll. Matt's got poll skills.
Matt can still do polls?
Yeah.
So one thing
what is your question? What do you want to poll?
Oh, I was just going to say, like, what would make a cool dynamic composition, cool camera angle? Like, what would tell the story the best? We could do close-up shot. We could do. I was thinking about this kind of. I was thinking of this kind of rule of thirds, where what we have is we have to decide first of all whether we want to be at Luke's eye level or whether we want to kind of experience it from above, because ultimately there's this weird middle ground where you're either an aerial or you're a ground plane. But sometimes people like to go like 3 or 4 feet. It always bugs me in architecture renderings when they go like 4 feet above eye level. It's like because they want to show more of the ground. It's like pick one, either eye level or up high.
I think eye level. Eye level is more engaging. That's my vote.
Eye level. I don't mind going like a little bit higher, but I just mean like that sort of 12 foot. So I don't have a composition grid set up, but I'm thinking about the horizon being centered. So the bottom of the swamp hits at about 1/3. You'll see that the fog and the sky will hit at 1/3. Luke is at 1/3 and R2 is at 1/3. So Luke is maybe concerned about R2 saying, dude, I need you, to stop messing around and get over here and join me. And R2's like, I'm concerned that your ship is sinking. He wouldn't say it like that. He'd say it in beeps, though. All right, so now...
So Eric threw up a poll. Matt threw up a poll of close-up shot, Luke's eye level, or up above. So we'll see. We'll see what people think.
I'm gonna say eye. This one is gonna be eye level. I'm gonna set this now and save it. So let's just pretend like that's the shot. So what we want to do is I'm gonna do something that's kind of fun. We don't have to do this, but if you go to Tools, an extension that's a free extension called Advanced Camera Tools by SketchUp, you can create a camera that mimics sort of a film camera. So I can call this, just camera 1 is fine. So what's interesting about this is that it tells you, if I zoom out, it actually places a camera in the model. And then the other thing it does, if I go up to Tools, Advanced Camera, and Show Hide Camera Frustum, I don't know what frustum, that's a fancy word, but I assume that just means what shows up in the field of view. Show the volume. What it's doing is it basically says, this is everything that shows up in your camera. So if you want more, you change your field of view to go wider. If you want to keep the field of view the same, then in this case, you can see that I'm just barely cutting off the engine. And I could ask myself, do I want to move the camera or do I want to move the X-Wing at this point? Because now I can see the camera volume. I thought that's pretty cool. Cool tip.
That's nice. That's a good idea.
And it applies it to its own tag. So you can actually, it just automatically puts it on a tag. So you can turn it off and on. So anyway, the reason why I say that.
Poll is in and everybody, the majority says Luke's eye level.
Luke's eye level. Okay, so we're kind of in Luke's, we're putting ourselves kind of in Luke's shoe. So not necessarily what he's seeing, but we want to kind of imagine ourselves being like Luke, and he's just got stuck and he's like, what the heck am I going to do about this situation I'm in? So now that we have that camera set up and we know how wide the camera is, now we can start placing some entourage. This is where it gets fun, because what I want to do is I want to take about the next 20 to 30 minutes to place the rest of our entourage, if we can do that. And then I want to spend the last maybe bit of time seeing if we can put some polish on it and make it look beautiful. And again, we're not probably going to be able to do everything that I would like to do, but let's just kind of see where we get. It's kind of fun. So let's pop back over here to our asset file. And I'm going to zoom out just so I can see everything. Zoom extents. I'm going to grab these two. I'm going to leave the roots for last because I want to share. This might be actually a good time. Let's just grab it first. And then what I'll do is, and then I want to share a little bit about importing objects that are sort of non-SketchUp friendly, like that swamp cypress that we just saw in Sketchfab. If you were to download one of those and it gives it to you as an OBJ. Some people know that process, other people don't. And I just want to let them know, like, don't be afraid. It's okay. First thing I'm going to do, I almost like when I teach with my class, I demo it once or twice, and then I ask them, what is it we do after we import an object from an outside source? And this is where Matt and the sound effects with kids would say, put it on a tag.
Oh.
Right?
Nobody's going to get a chance to respond. Because you're already going to say, actually they might, because there's that whole 2-minute delay.
There's a slight delay. So when I asked that and then I was waiting for an answer, of course, I'm not actually going to wait for an answer. So sorry, everyone. There's a slight delay in case we have like a...
It's just a dramatic pause. It's fine. It's for effect.
It's for effect.
We're going for a dynamic live stream.
So it doesn't really matter where these go, because that's not, I mean, it's going to be totally random, but you're probably asking like, well, wait a minute, one of these trees, okay, so all I did was, sorry, let me back up. What I did was just switch my color by tag on just to make sure that everything is still on the right tag, which it is, so I can go ahead and pop that off. I am working, as I work without my textures showing. And it's because I have hopefully a good enough imagination that I know what the bark looks like and I know what the leaves look like. So I'm actually comfortable working with the textures off, because especially when we start getting more and more of these really high poly, high textured models into it, it's good. Performance does kind of start to take a little bit of a hit. So I'm kind of jumping the gun by turning that off in advance and not waiting for things to kind of slow down.
It's good. It's a good idea. Definitely don't want to wait until it's lagging and then start trying to undo your lag.
Because like I said, we're also live streaming, so we're using video, and we're putting a lot of strain on the processor. So I want to definitely sort of keep it as simple as we can. So what I'm doing here is I didn't do that right. So let me undo this. The next step for me anyway, and again, I'm not going in any particular order, is I'm trying to lock my rotation to the left, which is the green axis, so that I can flip it 180 degrees. Now, if you don't want to do it that way, you can also come over here, right click and say flip along the group's blue, assuming that it has the right axis. And one thing, that was a little bit of a clue when it said flip along the group's axis. That would be a good chance for me to come in and say, whoa, I didn't realize that came in as a group. Let's make sure that that's a component. there's a small chance that I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to need to, I would want to edit one time for all of them. And this one is a component. This one did come in as a component, so that's perfect. I know that Dave R., who many of you know from the forums, he's kind of a component for everything kind of guy. But for me with landscape, I think of it as groups are containers for lots of objects, but objects are components. So I work with both groups and components. So what I'm doing here. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You interrupt me as much as you want.
No, I think that's a big part of how Aaron handles it as groups too. Tyson, they're both. I think they both. I don't think I've heard anybody actually break it down as big groups or lots of things in a group, and components as objects. So I think that's a very good, clear way to say it. It's a different perspective than what I had.
Yeah, because there's no reason to make if I was to group all my terrain elements, there's no reason for me to component all of my terrain elements, because each piece of the terrain is a component. So all that does is keep it it just keeps it together. So yeah. I say stuff as if I'm got some special skills or whatever, and of course I don't. Whenever I watch the forums, I read the forums and I look at Box and some of the other folks and Mihai, and I watch how they do stuff, and I just go, whoa, that's such a cool way to do it. So it's only when I'm by myself do I think I know what I'm doing, and then once when I'm with other
clever.
people,
oh wait,
I'm so clever. When it's just me, it's easy to be clever when it's just me, because there's no one to argue.
Well, I think you're clever too. So don't you sell yourself short.
All right. So I'm just kind of playing around while we banter. What I'm doing, obviously, is I took a dead tree and I flipped it upside down, and I copied it and rotated it and mirrored it. So I'm using that flip along feature again, flip along the green, flip along the red, so to create that sort of variety. So now what I'm doing, I'm also looking at things like scale. So when we're doing landscape, it's okay to do non-uniform scales. Because I know some people will say, oh, no, don't do that. Don't do non-uniform scale. But when you're trying to create variety with vegetation, you want as much sort of small things as you can to be different about it. So in this case, what I can do is kind of cool here is, let's see, I'm going to try and think about how to do this. I'm going to group the tree roots together, and then I've left the sort of cypress on its own. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy a few of these. I'm going to group those together. So remember, I've got now a group container with components within. And you might say, well, why didn't you make the whole thing a component? Because if you change one, don't you want to change all of them? And the answer is no, because what I might want to do is come in here and actually push some of the roots down lower, in which case I want that to be different. And if I copy this one again, I'm using the modifier. So if you see the little plus sign pop up. So the same thing, I'm going to go in here, and I might come in here and say, actually, let's move this up. And let's actually scale this so that this is larger. I'm going to use the modifier, so I'm scaling from the center point. And I'm hoping that these leaves, I know that you might see the trunk, but there's two things that I'm already thinking about, which is number one, is that any of these trees that are closer, let me turn my textures on for this. Any trees that are closer to the camera, you're not going to see above the trunk. So it's mostly about what's happening at the ground level. But the other thing is that I'm hoping that these leaves and the moss kind of show that we're not just flipping a tree trunk upside down, like you can see right here. I'll just flip that 180. Problem, whoops, no, 90. Nope, 270. Yeah, fine. So we've got our water. Now, some of these too is I can also just grab these by themselves. And in this case, I paste it in place. I have a shortcut for paste in place, by the way. This for when you're doing landscape stuff, or big model stuff, I just love paste in place. I think that if I had to pick a favorite command, it might be that.
That's one of those that for the longest time, I completely slept on it. Didn't even think about it. And then you're just, one day you use it and you're like, oh, geez, what was I doing? What was I doing before this?
Yeah. For these ones, you'll notice I didn't bother the tree because I actually want to see through the trunks. Because if you remember that reference image that we showed earlier, I actually I like being able to see through the trunk. And that bald cypress that I used in the middle to show the leaves, that one you can't see through. So I'm actually combining a few of these, the ones in the foreground that I'm hoping the camera cuts off. I'm going to go ahead and show those as show those as I'm not actually combining it with the tree because I really just want all these trunks. Now, you might say, okay, Eric, that's fun. That's fun and all, but we've got all this ground plane, and I'm going to turn on my camera. And you can say, first of all, this is where we check to see, okay, cool, these roots are just popping into the view here. So that's actually cool because it goes into the water. And you might say, well, this one here is outside of the view. It might impact the shadows from V-Ray, but you might say, well, let's not waste a lot of time with stuff that doesn't show up in the view. But then you might also look at and be like, well, what about, well, you know what? I don't even need this terrain at all, do I? Because we ended up turning the camera a little bit so that we avoided that edge of the X-wing.
Yeah, that's another great reason to do the whole camera angle.
Yeah, so in this one here, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that one too, because I might not need that one either, because it might be far enough away. But the next thing is you might say, well, okay, now you've got a bunch of, what if you want to lay out 50 or 60 of these trees, just to like fill the background? And by these trees, I mean not the ones with the roots, because that's going to get really high poly really quick. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to separate one of those out again. Just going to make sure that we have one by itself. So this is where we can use the place component. There's a place component extension where you can just go click, 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 click. Didn't they just add that though? I should know this. Because copying and pasting one at a time is kind of, to be honest with you, it's kind of slow and tedious.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was in a maintenance update, because we're kind of had a dearth of those this year.
I thought we just added the ability, and I don't, correct me if I'm, just because we got Basecamp coming up, by the way. This is a Basecamp plug. We got Basecamp coming up, so that's sort of consuming all of our time and energy for the next week or so until we land in Vancouver.
I don't think we're having a live stream next week either, because most of the people involved in live stream are going to be en route. Good reminder for our viewers. You don't need to come next Friday. You can find something else useful to do with your time. Oh, Aaron commented that groups are actually for rebel sympathizers. So I think he might be lashing out a little bit there. That would be
me, right? I mean, aren't we all? I don't know. There was a time when like Anakin was transitioning, right? And it was sort of like I felt bad for him. I know that some people don't like the prequels, but I think Hayden Christensen did as good a job as anyone could have done in those.
I think with the direction he was given, I think he did a great job.
Well, given the fact that he was acting on a green screen the entire time, I was going to say, don't get me started, but you kind of did. So, all right. Well, my scatter, what I was going to say is that we can do scatter, but what might actually be better is if, just because I think that's another paid extension, maybe it's okay not to show too many, is once you've done kind of a random group like this, we can actually just go ahead and copy. We can do something like we can do an array. So there's lots of ways that we can get multiple trees. If I go over here and I just use my array copy, and then I just do that, I could either set a quantity.
It's funny that because as you said, scatter almost the exact same time. Transom commented there was a scatter tool, and then Michael was wondering if there was something that actually an array plugin that randomized object placement.
There are all of those things, but I want to be careful that I don't, first of all, risk like any crashes, but I also don't want to spend a bunch of time. Then I kind of get into the weeds and I'll be like, oh, here are the scatter settings, and I want to make sure that we just kind of stay on topic here. So I'm just doing this manually right now because it's kind of a small group, but if it was a much larger plane, definitely there's some good options for that.
Yeah, I think the phrase you were looking to say was stay on target.
Stay on target. Now, this one here, I did not make that a component, so that doesn't help me, because one thing you can do, there's also an extension by Chris Fulmer that's free, it's called Scale and Rotate Multiple. So what it'll do is it'll actually rotate all of these. We could try it. Do you want to try it?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to select all of these ones in the background. I just did these as groups because I was being lazy. Obviously, I could do these as individuals. Extensions, Chris Fulmer, Scale and Rotate Multiple, and then Scale and Rotate Randomly. So in this case, let's see, because I didn't set an axis on this, so good, I don't need to. I'm gonna rotate it from the center point. I want to scale it maximum 1.2. I want to shrink it, minimum scale, let's say 0.85, 1.2, minimum rotation, let's say 35 degrees, and maximum rotation 300 degrees. Let's see what happens. This may not work. Did it do anything? Didn't do anything, did it?
It's hard to tell.
It's probably because they were groups and not components. Chris, I'm gonna have a conversation with Chris. You know what happened?
What happened?
We had a crash. Yeah.
Oh, geez. I thought you clicked out of that. Nice. Well done. That's why you pay for your extensions right there.
I just said I shouldn't do this, right? Because I was like, because it's it's asking a lot, and then that's why.
The best rule is always make sure you save right before you go try and do something componenty.
Okay.
Or extension-y.
Well, you know what? I guess it makes it a little bit more fun. And then there's also another extension that maybe we could try using instead. So everyone who's following along, thank you for your patience and your sympathy. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do this the old-fashioned way because at this point I just want to move to the next step. So, and then if I want
there's a difference between just trying to find the perfect plugin versus just trying to get the thing done. I often catch myself searching after the perfect plugin rather than actually doing the work. So,
yeah, I actually love it when it's just me on my own time. I love the experimentation of trying different extensions. I know anyone I'll give a plug for Justin Geis for SketchUp Essentials. He's also great at that. He'll just play with different extensions and he'll show you. Save. All right. On that note, let's take a look at our camera. I think our camera is, what do you think? You think that's okay? I think that's okay.
I think that looks really good.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my textures on. So I'm going to add more of these. We can add more of these later, right? Because the point of this exercise isn't necessarily that we're doing this perfectly, right? Because there's a few other ways to do this. We can add them in Photoshop. We can add an HDRI background. We can add a 2D image. There's a lot of different ways that you could sort of get the background looking exactly like you want it. So we don't need to necessarily sit and lay out, hundreds of trees together. So to get the point. One thing we need is some. Oh, sorry.
As you kick in the fog, and as it gets darker, as it gets moody, the trees will become a bit less relevant anyway. So.
Yeah. So one thing we want to do is I want to look at adding some more roots into like the ground plane, because right now we haven't really done anything with the ground plane. If I turn my hidden geometry on, you can see that we've got we do have that undulation, we do have that grid. Sorry, I just touched my microphone. But there isn't anything. We've got the detail now in the entourage, but we haven't done anything with the ground plane. So what I want to do is save.
Always save.
And then I want to. Yes, go ahead.
I love how it looks like he crash landed on Hoth right now because it's they're in the trees. It's all snowy.
Oh yeah, if I do this. Yeah, see? Yeah, now we got a Hoth rendering.
It's all in the colors.
So the cool thing about this here is that I can go ahead and turn my trees off because I've tagged them because I don't really need them right now. I'm going to, once we start our render, we're probably going to go and move some of them around. We might scale one, we might copy one, but for the most part, they're okay where they are. Let's just go ahead and say that's good. So what these are right here, and I want to this is where I want to talk about what I mentioned before about with the tree trunk, is that if you download an asset from a different source, getting it into SketchUp sometimes, depending on what it is, where it came from, it might be a bit challenging. So if you feel ambitious, I don't want to do another poll, but if we want to, maybe I can take a moment just to show you how to bring in something that is designed for rendering and not necessarily something that you might find on the 3D warehouse.
So, try that out.
We can try it out.
You got 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes before you're halfway.
We got 5 minutes before you cut me off. Well, good, because we're about to switch. We got 5 more minutes, and then I want to switch into the rendering side of this. So this is me. I want to get my roots in, and I want to show you how I got those. So if I come over here, and I'll show you just in my Finder window, I think that's because that's kind of important, is that in this case, I got this. I'm going to do it with the one that I just did because I'm doing it a little bit backwards, but because I want to explain where I got these roots from. But basically, Megascans, which is owned by Quixel, which Unreal Engine just acquired, they go out and they scan. They use photogrammetry, right? So they use these high-res 3D scanners to scan stuff in the real world. So that's going to be so much better than me trying to model a tree and then apply a bark texture to it, because it's a real tree. So that's going to really dramatically increase sort of the realism just by bringing in an asset that not only is from a real scan, but it's high poly and it has what's called PBR, or photorealistic materials, associated with it. And I'll give you an example here just for that tree. It also comes with a displacement layer. I'm not going to go into this detail because I don't want to spend the whole time just boring people, because some people are like, I'm here to just see SketchUp, not rendering.
Going to nerd mode.
Nerd mode. So what it does, basically what it means is that when you bring it in, you can bring it in with all of these material attributes that SketchUp doesn't recognize, but V-Ray does. And that's cool, because in this case, you can choose. If you're staying in SketchUp, then you don't need it, but it could be there and it's okay. It doesn't hurt you. But if you do decide at some point, whether now or later, to render, that's when I think it's nice to know that you have that access to that. So what I'm going to do is start by grabbing an FBX. It doesn't matter which level of detail. You know, the higher level of details are going to be more geometry. So depending on how much geometry, you pick a level of detail that you want. Go ahead and drop it into, this is Transmutr. So this is by the same developer that did Skatter, because they knew that if you're going to scatter stuff, you're going to want to make sure that you can get it in order to scatter. So I'm going to switch to, so there it is with no materials. And then I would switch over here to the materials section. So that's the geometry. And then I would switch over here to materials. And what's really cool about this is that it's already set up for rendering. So whether you're V-Ray, Thea, Enscape, it doesn't really matter. All you do is you drag and drop these. This is called the diffuse, which is basically its material, it's raw material. And then I want to come over here to normal, and then you just grab the normal material. So you're just literally just lining up the names. I wish it would do it automatically, but I don't know. I ask for a lot from my
feature request. Go and submit a ticket.
And that's it. Now they have roughness, which you could use as sort of a reflection layer, which sometimes would add a metallicness to it, which you may or may not want, or you may need to adjust later. So I'll just put that in and then we'll decide. So what's cool about that now is when I click Transmute, it's going to ask me where do I want to save it. I'm going to save it. And it's going to save everything back to my desktop. So if I pop back over to my desktop, view, sidebar, before we run out of time. There it is. It's right there. So I'm going to click on right here. So I'm going to open that up. I just want to show you how that works, because that's how I got those other assets. And then I'm going to click on render, because I want to see if it pulled all of those maps in with it. And then I need to find my, okay, so we're going to render. There it is. So what's cool about this, if I go in really close, it's a little hard to tell, but you can see that there's bumps in the, where like the knots are in the tree. And you can see that even better if you change the shadow settings. So I go window, shadows, and then we'll move on so I don't lose people.
Now is this, so we don't, obviously we don't have bump mapping in SketchUp, but is this where bump mapping becomes relevant, or is this a way around that, or?
Yeah, so like if you look at this little knot right here, you can see that that's not geometry. It's not geometry. It's in the bump. So yeah, thanks. See, Jody, I need more puns from you.
Sorry.
More cowbell.
I'll work on my cowbell.
No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry, go ahead.
You're doing great. Yeah, you can see that shadow on that knot changed. So if I click right here, if I go to here, you'll notice that knot is not there in the model. Or that bump, that little lesion or whatever. It's actually just being, it's going straight to the render. So that's a great way to get detail in the model without having to add any extra geometry. So you can use, actually, in this case, you can see that if I turn my hidden geometry, this tree here, it's not super high poly. It's like medium poly. So the bump maps and stuff are doing the heavy lifting in this case. So sorry, I didn't want to do it. I didn't mean to take too much time on that. I just want to say that it's really cool that when you find assets, and if you know you're going to render, you can be thinking about whether or not it comes with those things, and then of course whether or not you want to work with them. I'm going to spend, because I spent some time on Transmutr, I'm just going to go ahead and drop these in. All I'm doing with this, oh, a little tip here. I have an extension called Hide Edges. I think this one's by, I want to say Fredo. So correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. So what I'm doing is I'm turning the edges off of these roots so that way if it is high poly, it's okay. And I'm not turning all the edges off in my model. I'm just turning them off for this asset. So it makes like when I copy them, it's going to make working with them a little bit faster. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm just adding these roots to different places in the model so that the ground plane itself doesn't feel, I don't know, just so flat. And then if I need to rotate, so that I can get it right. Which way do I want to rotate this one? Not that way. 5. Yeah, perfect. Okay. And same thing, I can just rotate it around, or I can use the flip along. If I wanted to give some variety, I just use the flip along, which is like a quick quick way, to do like a mirroring.
It's nice that you have the water in place, so then as you're doing it, you can really see how the water is sort of filling it out. Too.
Yeah, you can see I'm kind of doing it so that they're also, you can see that the roots themselves actually go under the water, because if I turn the water off, or if I go color by tag and I choose, in this case, I make the water texture transparent. That was something that took me a long time to learn, that in color by tag, you can use transparent materials. Cool thing about that is you can see that I can place these roots and they kind of drop down, and that way when it renders, because there's transparency in the water, I can actually see the roots sticking out into the water. That's all.
I think it took me longer to realize that than it did you, because I had never even thought of that. That was a great idea.
See, this is what I love about teaching SketchUp, is because I've learned from so many people that like my goal in life is to give something back, even if it's just something stupid. Like you can use, and you can actually, that you can actually use materials too. Like if I wanted to switch over here to my material library in color override, I can actually go to water and I can click this water texture and click OK. And it's actually overriding so I'm still using color by tag, but it's applying a texture. Someone taught me that in KBiz. I went to the KBiz conference.
Well, I don't know if you will consider this a compliment or not, but Bill was pointing out that the last time you did rendering, you completely blew his mind, and he wasn't quite sure. He was hoping that he had enough of his mind left to be able to handle whatever happens today. So,
well, does he have? Well, he's here with us, so I assume that's
yeah. It's so far so good.
Okay.
He hasn't all of a sudden gotten quiet or anything. So
I could obviously do this. We could spend. Hang on 1 second. Somebody's mowing their lawn. Don't you love that? Okay. I don't think you guys want to hear that. So I'm going to stop there. And the reason why is because you get the idea. I mean, part of this is just for me to introduce topics and not make everything perfect. I would do that. If it was me, I could sit and spend 45 minutes just on detailing out the ground plane. But the reality is when I did this the first time, I did it during the pandemic. I did it, I called it the 2-hour render challenge. And I would start at about 9 o'clock and I would end about 11, sometime before midnight, 11:30. And so I would start from scratch. Like I would come up with an idea, find the reference, find the assets, build the model, and render in 2 hours. And that was where I kind of, so even for me, even though I can sit and play around and I love playing around with this, even for me, I want to kind of just do what Ron Popeil says, set it and forget it and move on.
Ron Popeil. I haven't heard that name in a while.
Joke. I know.
There's a name I haven't heard in a very long time.
It also shows my age too, which I love to 80s movies references and stuff. When I'm teaching kids, oh my gosh, when I was teaching university, I would like mention all kinds of 80s and 90s movies and their eyes are just glazed over. And I'd just be like, what? How do you? Kids. But then again, my parents, I swear, for somebody who's older than me, might know the film Cat Ballou. I've never saw it still to this day because my parents made me. They kept saying, you got to watch the Cat Ballou, because to them, that was like the big movie in the 70s. And I was like, no. This is weird. No. Okay.
I've not seen it. So
great. We're going to save. So I'm a few minutes over, but I think if everyone's okay, I would love to start the material and the lighting section of this And then, so we're going to apply some materials. So it's going to be a little bit like we did last time together, where I just go pick some materials in V-Ray, apply it, do a couple of test renders, see how it's looking. Then we're going to play with some effects because if I go back to this image, I'm going to keep going back to this image. You can see a couple of things. Number one, it's very blue. Number two, it's very foggy. And number three, the light sources are very specific. So the lights on the X-Wing itself that are actually casting underwater, which I think is cool. And then of course you've got R2 and then maybe like some environmental lighting. Where should we start? I'm going to start with, don't say from the beginning, like Sound of Music reference.
No, there's a different movie. We're not doing references to other movies.
We're not doing, stay in Star Wars?
Yep.
All right. So I do the same thing every single time because I'm a creature of habit. The first thing I do is I switch to match viewport in V-Ray, because what I want to do is if I change my viewport, I want to just render whatever I'm seeing. So I do that. Second thing I do is by default, your ambient occlusion under global illuminations, it's hidden under the advanced rollout. I like it. I think it helps, especially when you're doing something stylized. So by default, I'll turn that on and I might bump it up. So those are kind of, and then the second thing I do is I start with interactive. The third thing I do, I turn it on, I switch to an interactive render. I push my quality all the way down low. And I turn the denoiser on now, even though I don't use it in the interactive render, but I'm gonna turn that on now so I don't forget, because I actually might forget later. And then because I'm just looking at lighting right now, I'm going to go ahead and turn the materials override setting on, and then we're going to go ahead and kickstart a little render together. How are we doing, by the way? How's the comments? How's our viewers? Doing all right? How are you, Jody? You still with me? Hang on one second. Okay. I'll assume we're doing good. So I've got my materials override. The first thing that stands out, obviously, is going to be the lighting itself. So this is not going to work at all, not for this scene. So I'm going to press stop. And I already knew this going into it, but I'm going to go ahead and bring in a dome light. So we saw that when we did our little render session a couple weeks ago. We talked about a dome light when we were using LightGen, but in this case, actually, I have one that I think is going to work even better. So if I come over here to my assets, let me find, where are my live model assets that I sort of pre-planned? And I come over here, I have this one that I found online, and it was for free, and it was from, you'll have to give me cut me some slack. I'll type it in the chat because I know he just changed the name. It was originally called HDRI Haven, and I think it was the name changed recently. So thank you to HDRI.
I am here. You started asking me questions as soon as I stepped away to grab my water. So
of course.
It's perfect timing. Thanks.
I was like, wait, hang on. I'm like by myself. I feel alone. I feel like Luke now. Only he had R2. I don't even have that.
He did have R2. I don't understand how he understood R2, but he could even talk to R2 and apparently get a response. So
I know. Those are the things that there's a term in film. It's called suspend disbelief, because if you go into a film thinking that you're going to question that kind of stuff, like, did he eat? He hasn't eaten this whole time. You're not going to enjoy it. So don't do that. Back to it. I just mentioned dome light while you were away. So the dome light is because I did a test render, and obviously this is not going to work at all for the kind of mood that we're setting. The environmental lighting is key for the mood. So I'm going to go ahead and I added a dome light, and I'm going to switch it. By default, it comes with the one that Chaos Group just gives you. It's got some clouds. And so what I'm going to do is go to the one that I put it here. It's called Misty Pines, and I got that from online. And I already know that
Matt was asking Polyhaven. Is that
Polyhaven? It might be Polyhaven now, because I think he merged with, I think he offers more assets other than just HDRIs. But obviously, he also does it. He gives them away for free, but he does it by donation. That's why I'm plugging him, because I love people who do that. I donate. When Radiohead put their album In Rainbows out for free, I downloaded it and then paid for it, because I just thought, why not? Yeah. Well, I think I listened to it first, and then I liked it, and then I paid for it. So
that's nice.
That's a
trial mode.
Trial mode. I feel like music. Well, see, the iTunes gives you that 30 seconds or 15 seconds, and that's not enough. So you can see what happened instantly by turning that on. And I'm going to open up my options. And while it's rendering, I'm going to change it to invisible. You can see quickly that it just pretty much took out all the harsh shadows. And if I wanted to turn my material override setting off and see what the lighting does for that, I'm going to stop the render. Whenever you do anything really tricky, stop the render and then start it back up. So I turn material override off and waiting for it to kick back in. There we go. So it's not giving us, it's telling me two things. Number one is it took the harshness off of the lighting, but it's also saying that you're not going to get the blues. You're not going to get the fogs. You're not going to get all that stuff that I'm looking for. I'm going to have to do a lot more in here in V-Ray and in some post-production, some edits, some color edits that we're going to do. In fact, as soon as we get our water and our ground plane textured and our lights in, that's what we're going to do next. So I'm going to stop there and say, okay, at least I took out that harsh shadows. And I think that's important for like a dusky kind of shot. So I'm going to pause on dome light and I'm going to switch over to some materials. So now I feel okay, at least I feel okay with that. So let's do some materials. What do we know we need? What do we have in our model? We have
leaves, we have bark.
Well,
talking about material-wise?
Material-wise. I think what we have is the two things that don't have materials. If I turn my materials on my texture setting back on, we have materials here, which we can edit, which we need to edit. But what we have is we have two that don't have anything, which is our ground plane and our water. So if we start with the water, you can see it's selected. So if I turn my X-ray mode on, X-ray. Oh, did I not? Someone didn't call me out on this. I didn't put these on
their own tag.
I didn't put them. Yeah, no one called me out on this. That was what I was supposed to
Everybody,
do.
we all just assumed you knew what you were doing. That's what it is.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. I say you guys, I mean guys and gals, obviously. So I'm going to put that on roots. There we go. And change the color so that it's a little bit of a different color. So the reason why I did that is because what I wanted to do was I need basically just my terrain and my water showing for right now. I'll leave everything else off for a minute. Let's start with water. V-Ray's got some really great liquid materials. And if I scroll all the way down, you have these waves. Two of them are procedural, which means that they actually are generated through settings. And two of them are materials, which actually have like a noise map applied to it. So I'm just going to grab the one that's not procedural, if I could say it right. Make sure that my water is selected and apply it to selection. Now, what I said earlier is by tagging things, you can say, I could say I want to apply it to a layer as well if I wanted to do that. It's already in there, so we're cool. The other thing too is because this is a texture, you can see that wave. This is the wave texture. You can't see all the fanciness. That's going to come in later, but I can also change the scale of it. So if we want to, we'll look at that later. I probably do want to change the scale of it, but bump. I want to change the scale of the bump. Forgive me if I'm getting into the weeds a little bit. Color manipulation. This is where I always get confused. This is why I stay out of advanced settings, I'll be honest with you. So anyone who, like, whenever I teach this, I usually say don't ever go into the advanced settings because this is where you're going to get into some trouble.
Yeah, I always feel like I need to know what I don't know before I can even start messing around in that area.
Yeah, so what I was looking for was, I can't remember where it was. It's the size. That's okay. We'll come back to it later. It's fine. See, I just gave you an example, kids. Why not to do that? Because you forget where things are when you go into the advanced settings. Now we need a ground texture. So I think what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to use sort of like a soil. And then I'm going to let, oh, you know what'd be really cool? Is if I had, no, what you want to know would be really cool. If we really were going to do this right, which we're not going to, because then I have to, it's going to take me too long. I have to go find a material. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply just a soil to it. Apply to selection. So there we go. We've got this ground, sort of a ground plane texture. And then we're going to have to let our roots do sort of the heavy lifting as far as making it look more mossy and stuff like that. Because right now I'm just going to start with a brown one just to keep things moving along. And then once it's in the model, from there I usually will, once it's in the model, I will just grab it and I should be able to paste it. Now, something came up in the forums the other day. Somebody was listening to my render stream and they said, well, Eric, you applied it to the container, which is basically applying it to the outside. So you'll see here is that I'm applying it to the group, not the surface. So if I check the surface, it's still the default. Now, the reason why I do that is because if I changed my mind and I wanted to come in here and say, well, no, that's not the right texture, I want to go darker, then what I could do is say, well, let's apply this to that selection. Which one am I applying? This one, the darker one. Apply that to the selection. You can see what's cool about that is I can just change my mind. I just select it and sample it if I wanted to do a darker one. But if you do it to the inside of the face, you can't, you have to go inside and then sample and then inside to paste. But if you're doing something like a wood grain, where you need the grain to be going a certain direction, you probably want to apply it to that face because a piece of wood is going to have the texture going in different directions. So I'll just caveat what I do by saying that I'm doing it sort of the lazy way. So.
Noted. You're lazy. Okay.
No. Well, what we're going to say, we're going to call this in render terms the efficient way.
Okay. Efficient. That's better.
Doesn't that sound better?
I was wondering if do you ever use Chaos Cosmos as assets? I assume, so by the name, it sounds to me like that would be what V-Ray actually, like their own stuff.
Well, that's a good point. And not to go into too much what V-Ray 6 is about to launch or drop. And yeah, one thing they're doing is they're moving the materials from the materials browser the way that I just grabbed them to Cosmos. And it's because Cosmos already has all of the other assets in it. So if I open Cosmos, just to remind everybody what Cosmos is all cloud-based. So it basically means that they can keep pushing updates because it's all in the cloud. So what you can see, they've already started doing this by adding materials to Cosmos. So that's a great point, is if I wanted to look at ground, I don't know, leaves. I could probably do that online, but here's one right here where grass, dry, leaves. If I felt like that was a better one, I could just go ahead and import, and what it'll do is it'll download it and import it, and I can use that. Or I could just stick with the one that we've got. But Cosmos is currently a good resource for more materials that we don't have in our library, but also keep in mind, it's also where you're going to eventually get your materials from. So probably a good idea to start learning how to use that.
Next week.
Test render. Because I want to get into the lighting, because the lighting is going to be the big thing. So I just kind of want to stop there and say, right now, if you look at this, I'm going to brighten this up a little bit, add an exposure, just so that you can see it a little bit better for right now. This looks really bad. I'll be the first person to say that, is that it doesn't look great. And I think it's because we're missing the color, the fog, and the lights to create that mood. So from this point on, I think we're just going to do the mood. And then the last thing, if we have time, somebody asked us in the other one, we did the splash graphic that had the lines and it faded from SketchUp to V-Ray. So if we do find ourselves with any time, we can show how to overlay that line work on top of it, but that might be too much. So in the camera settings, something I found, which is kind of fun. I used to do this in Photoshop, but you can actually, there's a vignette effect that you can apply. So I'm going to turn that on, set it to 1. And then the second thing I'm going to do is come over here and I'm going to leave my scene as it is, and I'm going to start playing with the color now. The reason why is because if I can do the color adjustments in advance, as opposed to doing them later, that might tell me like, oh, actually, you don't need to do as much in the model as you thought you need to do, because the color adjustments are going to start to come in. So you can see I'm just bringing the blues up. I'm bringing the cyan in. I'm coming in here. I'm adding a hue saturation, which is going to allow me to pull saturation out. Under exposure, I can bump the contrast up, bring highlight burn down, exposure up.
This part all feels feels very fiddly.
Feels very fiddly.
Tweak it this way and that way.
This is where I kind of love to play it in the fiddly bits because I don't know. It's like cooking where you're putting the toppings on the pizza. You've done the hard work already. You know, you made the dough and you've got it all and the oven's on. But it's like I'm like, oh no, my onion distribution, it's too heavy on one side, so I'm gonna pick some onions and move it to the other. Do you know what I mean? Like this is that kind of fine tuning that you get to do based on your flavor profile. If somebody says, no, I want it more bright and poppy, that's fine. No, I want it more moody, where it's more bluey. You know, this is where you sort of get to pick that. I'll kind of stop there.
I like my pizza to be moody.
Do you like bluey? Do you like blue pizza? Bluey pizza?
Sure, or moody.
Moody pizza. I'm going to stop there because what I want to do, the next part, I think is going to be the fog that I think is going to do some more heavy lifting for us. And then the last thing is lights, and we're going to call it. I think we're going to be okay on time here. We didn't get to fog last time. Fog is one of those things too, where it's like, you know, try to stay away from the advanced stuff if you can, because this is where you can start to screw stuff up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called a render region. So I'm just going to render half of my model, and I want you to see that the half that has the bounding box is going to render, and the other half is going to stay the same. And so what it's going to do, it's going to let us kind of compare what the fog does versus not having it. So the first thing we should do is just kickstart an interactive render. The other thing you're going to see is hopefully my vignette comes in, because the one over to the right was before I did the vignette. So you can see that the corners are darker. I don't know. What do you think? I think already, doesn't that feel?
Yeah, that looks like it's
way closer to what we're, and this is just the default setting. So I haven't modified anything yet. So
yeah, it's insane how quickly it can change.
How quickly it can change. Yeah, so I'll leave that. Sorry, I want to zoom in because I just wanted you to see the details, but then also at the same time, I want to get the whole thing in the shot. So I'm going to zoom out for a little bit. So the fog settings are, first thing is you can apply a color to a fog. So if we did want to make it a little bit of in that bluey kind of purpley range, cyany. Is cyany a word?
It is now.
It is now. So I'm going to apply a color to the fog. The second thing is I can do, this is where I wish the Chaos Group was listening, because what it does is it lets you pick distance or height, but you can't do, it says you can do both, but you can't do it both, not the way that I want to do it. I want to show you, because in a bog, in a swamp, in a bog, I'm going to go back to our image here. You can see that the fog stays, as you might imagine a swamp, it stays like kind of right above the surface, like lower than your eye level. So what I want to do is I want to start by bringing the distance slider forward so it comes almost, if I bring the distance slider forward, you can see that the fog just takes over everything. So then I'm going to bring my height all the way down to, I think it's in meters. So I want to kind of go up to, maybe it's in feet. I don't know. I'm not sure how it's measured. Doesn't really matter. But you see what I'm doing here? Do you see how he, now the fog, he sits in the fog, like it's just above the surface?
Yeah.
Stay with me. So now what I can do is I can push it back a little bit so that the fog, so that you can see that, you can still see the swamp and the reflections and stuff like that. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring my brightness up just for this, because so you can see it a little bit better, and then we'll darken it towards the end, because I think it helps to see it. But did you see how I've created that sort of surface fog? And if I wanted to go a little higher, I can go a little higher. Yeah, so it's all, this is where it's like, again, where you're playing with, it's like, oh, the higher it is, the further back I want it. Now, I want to say that because in what I would do when we do this, when we're ready to do our final render, after we do the lights in the next step, I need to come back. So I might have done this out of order. I need to come back and do 2 render passes. I'm going to do one where the fog is down low like this, and it sits just at the surface like of the water like that, so it stays below the tree trunks. And then I'm going to do a pass where, and I'll show you in just a second now. So think about that. The distance was about 1200, height was say about 50 or 60. So if I can remember that, I'm going to take a screenshot of that. Then what I would do is I'm going to flip that, and I'm going to say I want the height to go all the way to, I'm going to hit the height to like 1000. So it goes all the way to the sky, but I want the distance to be pushed, because what I want to do is I want that depth of field. Do you know like where those cypresses are, about 200 feet from us? I want that. This is what I want, where I want to push that depth of field where you're looking. I might have to go to something like 5,000. Yeah, that's pretty good, don't you think? Sorry if it's taking a little long to render. It's a lot. It's got a lot of information now. So when you have reflections and you have fog, like that's going to start to add up some stuff.
Now, so when you adjust the render distance like that, is it going to like speed it up a little bit because it's now not trying to deal with the stuff in the distance as much, or like is that a workaround or a hack for getting started?
Well, yeah, anytime you add anything to your model, like if you're doing fur, if you're doing lights, if you're doing reflections, if you're doing high poly assets, anytime you add anything, it's going to increase render time. So what you want to do is you want to kind of think about the order of operations. That's why I did the landscape first before I start doing fog, because now as soon as I start rendering, if I had that fog in from the very beginning, it's that all of those, unless that thing has an impact on everything that happens after, then in which case you might want to bump it forward. But in this case, you want to kind of be building just like with a painting, like we're adding layers and layers and layers. And so what we want to do is we don't want to do too high poly stuff in the beginning and find that all of our little test renders. So what did I say for distance? 1200, and height, I said 50. And here, I want to show you the comparison, then I want to move on because I think we all get it. Aaron is in my, I wish he had like a little walkie-talkie. He'd be like, all right, Eric, got it.
Let's go. He's not even in chat.
He's not even in the chat. So, but I still have his voice. So I just did a comparison. The reason why is because V-Ray doesn't let you create more than one fog. And I want to tell Chaos Group, like, can I not create more than one fog? So what I'm going to do is two render passes, one for the low and one for the high. And you composite that in Photoshop later. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to leave it on the low fog, turn my render region off, and set this aside. The last thing we need to do is we need to add a lamp. We're going to add a light to R2 so you can see his little headlamp glowing. We're going to add a, what would that be? Whatever the fog light is that you see in our inspirational image that's sort of glowing. And then I think what we're going to do is if we want to, we can throw a little sphere light on top of Luke so that he just doesn't, he's not sitting here all by himself in the dark. Is that okay? Is that okay with everyone?
I think that works.
I ask like if someone says no, I have to stop what I'm doing. I do ask. I do care. Whether you guys know or not, y'all, I care what you think of me. Like if you say something mean in the comments.
We appreciate.
I don't sleep that night.
That you're caring.
Yeah. So the sphere light, I want to add a little bit of a warm glow, but not too much. So I might do like kind of a reddish orange. So that it sort of feels it, but okay. So little tip for those that don't have an art background, and I don't have an art background either, but I did learn that warm colors come forward and cool colors recede. So if you want anything that to pop in the scene, then you want to give it a warm or a bright color, in which case your eye gets drawn to that. So if I want to highlight Luke in any way, then I might give him a warmer color or cast sort of an ambient light sort of around him. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to keep my render region. In this case, I'm going to keep my render region just on Luke. So I can I'm not burning all my processing power rendering the whole scene when I'm just kind of curious as to what the sphere light did for just this corner. So as you can see, I don't want to see the light. So I'm going to put it invisible. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I might make this a little bit more in the yellow range. And then I'm probably going to kick the intensity up. Okay, so I just did 200. Do you see how there's a little bit? So I'm going to turn that off and on if you can see the difference. So here it is on, here it is off. So it's subtle. He's a little darker. And the reason why that's going to be important is because I bumped my exposure up, but ultimately what I'm going to do at the end is I'm going to pull that exposure back down again. So it's it's a little bit darker. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we might actually do this. We might actually get to the finish line.
It might just happen.
It might just come together. I said this was ambitious, and it is. So I'll leave that like around 250. Again, I have no idea. I'll be the first to admit that I've got no idea what I'm doing. I just play with it. And it's like, kind of feel it, and I'd be like, how does it feel? It's weird to like
Yeah,
think about modeling. Like it's not a brain thing. It's a feeling thing. Like how is that feeling?
which is weird when you think of like, the kind of the binary world, the digital world of, it's everything can be tuned in on microscopic levels, but it's always numbers based. So when you try and make into a feeling, I don't know, it just sounds sort of woo-woo and hippie.
It does. But you know what? I always channel my inner Bob Ross when I do this stuff, because it's like he was great at like talking about feelings.
Transoms recommend saving. This feels like
I just did. Thank you.
Okay.
Where's the light on this thing, though? I don't even know where the lamp is. I think I just have to make one up. Oh, man. I don't even have like a proper headlight lamp. You can see in this render, it kind of pops up. So what I'm just going to do is model it. See, this is where it's like I can't rely on what someone did in the 3D warehouse because they may not have done it properly. So I'm just going to, it's okay, guys, right? It's an easy thing. Just model it.
Yeah, I feel like other than that particular shot that you've got there, probably most people never have occasion to think about the fog light. It might not even be there, right? You know how there's like supposedly there's like 6 different R2s based on the scene that they're shooting.
Oh yeah, good point. So wait a minute, I would imagine that the fog light, would it be in the upper wings as well? The shot that I have, it has it closed. But now I'm thinking maybe if it's a component, if this modeler, and I'm not going to call them out if they did it wrong, they did not make this a component. So shame on them. That's why I'm not going to call them out, because I'm shaming them.
That's good. Yeah, it's not. Because luckily, none of us have any idea where you actually got it, so they're still safe.
The fact is that like I think that we're as a community. This is where it gets tough. I'm trying to copy it, and it wants to rotate it. All right, I think I'm just going to do, I'm just going to keep this simple. I'm just going to do this one. I'm just going to do the lower wings and not the upper wings. Which just means that I have to rotate this one. This is where I'm struggling because it keeps wanting to switch to rotate.
This is why you do all your modeling before the rendering. Now, since you got the rendering going on, it's all confused.
Yes, you're right. I did not see it when I said pre-think. Well, one thing I did is I just made that light. I did not make that light a component. I thought I did. This is fun. You know what? Actually, I was talking to Aaron and those guys, and they said that, yeah, it's a component. Was this one a component? Yeah, that was a component. Oh, okay. It's just because I couldn't see the selection. Okay, yeah. So I was talking to Aaron and Tyson, and they said sometimes it's more fun when you screw up, and that it's okay because then the audience gets to see how you recover. And that's really more true to how we work in the profession, is that we screw up almost as much as we succeed. So
Michael pointed out that the camera didn't actually even see the other fog light anyway. Are you thinking that it's going to have any effect?
I think that I do think the light. I think it'll show up in the light, so that's why I'm doing it. So I have a sphere light and I have a spotlight. So that's what I'm going to do, and you'll notice I'm placing these inside of the component. Sorry, I keep going under the ground. I can take the terrain off if I need to. I have a sphere light and I'm going to add a spotlight. I typically don't use spotlights, and that's the reason why is because they really work more for interior design. I think it's because that's not a disparagement. I'm just saying that because it's a focused light as opposed to a sphere light, which is just a general light. And I think with landscape lighting, I tend to use the sphere lights more because to me it's easy. I don't have to worry so much about like getting the settings exact. It's just like casting, a glow, so to speak. All right, but this time I want to actually I want a narrow beam, like a headlamp. So I'm actually going to use a spotlight in this one, and we're going to see if this works. So stay with me, folks. I just saw Jurassic Park the other day. It was in the theater near me, the cheap theater. And I just love the line when Samuel Jackson's character says, "Hold on to your butts," because that's kind of what I think when I'm about to press render for it may not work.
Are we talking like the original Jurassic Park?
Yeah, the original.
Nice. Vintage.
Yeah. I know that Tyson did Jurassic Park, so I'm not going to change the topic. So one thing, and someone's going to correct me, is that the intensity is related to the type of the units that you work. So depending on whether or not you're using lumens, which I don't know anything about, or radians, because I'm not a lighting designer, I will say that if you're just using the default units, you'll find that if you render, and I'll show you here in just a second, let's go ahead and I'll show you that if we go render, and we're doing okay on time because we're just doing, this is it. We're doing the lights. Once we get this lighting done, we are cool. A couple of things are happening
25
here.
minutes.
Yeah. So please, if those that are still with us, thank you. Hang on. I think it'll be worth your time. The one thing I want to do is I want to go back to that sphere light. I copied the same sphere light. The reason why is I always start with the same sphere light because if I want to change the color to one, I usually want to change them to all of them. Now, if I want this one to be a different color, I'll just make this one unique. So just like a component. So that's why I often start with the same sphere light because it has all the settings applied. And then I copy that to different lights. And then I just make the decision if it needs to be unique. In this case, I want to say affect reflection. So watch what happens there. See how that sphere light is actually showing in specular and reflections. And the other thing is atmosphere. I can choose to whether or not I want it to show up in the atmosphere or not. One thing I'm getting is I'm getting this like ring right here. And that's because it's half in the water and half out of the water. So if you look at the sphere light itself, these are the things where it's like you learn what not to do after doing it the wrong way enough times. So you would think I would have known better. But what I want to do is just lift this one up a little bit and get it out of that water.
Sometimes we learn what not to do, but sometimes we don't learn what not to do. That's okay. Or it takes multiple times. I have to hit my finger with my hammer several times sometimes before I get out of the habit of hitting myself with a hammer.
All right. You've hit yourself. Don't do that.
I wouldn't do it on purpose. I don't do it anymore. I've done it a bunch of times already. So
it's like my kids when they hurt themselves and they do something like that. I always tell them, I tell them, don't do that. They're like, I just hurt myself with it. Don't do that. Well, of course, that doesn't help because they know not to do.
But that's proper fathering right there. I mean, you just have to make sure, in case they didn't realize.
Yeah, you get live modeling advice and parenting advice with this stream.
That's right.
Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to kick on a new render. I'm going to see if I can get rid of that little glowing effect that's happening there. And then this is hard because I'm doing the frame buffer modeling and adjusting the light at the same time. So this is where you would have you'd have multiple maybe monitors. So you can see here, I'm starting to get that effect where the spotlight is glowing into. So what I want to do is a few things. I want to make it a little bit more reddish orange, which is sort of in that reference image that we saw. Not red, it's more like reddish orange. And the other thing I want to do is I want to change the cone angle and I want to narrow it so that it's very like more focused. But you can change the penumbra angle, which is the softness. So you can play with the cone and the penumbra to sort of play with those two settings until you kind of get what you want. I kind of want to see that. And again, I'm going to have to stop because again, it's just one of those things where it's like, we could keep doing this, over and over again.
Right. It took you an hour to put the model together, but then you can spend another 2 hours just tweaking lights and doing every little thing.
This is kind of a big thing for me to kind of remind people that like when you're rendering, it's a balance. You're constantly thinking about the amount of information you need in the model versus the amount of information that you need in the rendering. And the two don't always jive. I'm going to make this unique. Remember how I just said, if I start by, I think I can make this one unique. It's not letting me make this one unique. Maybe what I'll do is I'll duplicate this one. Oh, why can't I? There we go. And this one is, if I check the name of it, this one's called Sphere Light. And what I really want to do is I'm just going to add another one at this point. It's not that hard. Sphere lights are easy to add. They're easy to adjust. That's why I use sphere lights. Again, I think you can call it lazy modeling if you want. I'm fine with that. Some people say not to, it's marketing, like marketing terms. Don't call it lazy. Call it working smart, not hard. But I also say like, I don't know. I don't really mind. I won't take offense to that.
They're just words. I think as long as you're not getting your ego all tucked into this, it's fine.
Okay, so what we're going to do is do the same thing again for those that didn't see it. We're going to make it invisible. We're going to say don't affect the reflection, specular, or atmosphere. So basically all you're doing is affecting the diffuse. The diffuse meaning the base material. Close that. Back it up. Oh, one more light. This is an important one. And then I promise I'm done with lighting. This one's tough because it's like I'm trying to get the rotation. I think I'm just gonna have to eyeball it and hope that you guys, yeah, I think I'm just gonna eyeball it. Right there. So I want to rotate R2 so he's looking more towards where Luke is. So I don't know if I got that right. And the reason why is because he's got this cool light here. So if I click on this light and I go to V-Ray, you can add lights, or what you can do is if there's already a color in the model, you can just come down here to say add emissive. So I'm saying I want this texture now to emit light. And what it's by default, it's going to emit a white light. So I just change the color and I want it to be a nice bright red. And I don't know what the intensity is, but the brighter the intensity, the more you're going to kind of maybe wash out that color. So I'm just going to sort of leave that for now and hope that that's enough. That's it. Save. Where are my save people? Where's Matt with the sound effects when you need them?
Transom's usage of lazy is, it's not lazy, it's effortless effort.
Effortless effort. I like that. Okay.
And yeah, Matt's a sound effects guy. I'm not so savvy. Sorry.
This is weird. You can see R2. This is weird, but I'm not seeing the glow as much as I thought as when we just did that test render on the spotlight. Didn't that look really good? Then I backed out, and then it was.
Yeah, no, he was even commented. Paul said it looked ace.
It did look ace. I like that term. All right, well, let me try it. Let me go back and look at it that one more time, because otherwise I'm going to get. Oh, I know why. Somehow I moved the light into. I must have accidentally selected it. So that was actually a good lesson. Oh no, it's there. One thing you want to do is be careful to make sure the light is not inside of an object, because even if it's just inside of a wall or something, you're going to see it doesn't cast that way. So let's try that again, and then I will thank everyone for their patience as they bear with me. Boy, we covered a lot today while I'm waiting for this to kick in. Covered Transmutr, covered PBR materials, covered lighting. You know what? It's there. I think the problem is that it's just that our camera angle is so low and the intensity isn't that bright. So I think what I'm going to do is just bump it up, and then it's either going to show or not show. And you're going to have to trust me that if that it works, but it's underwater. And so the camera angle, the water, the distortion angle, I'm going to blame it on the water.
I think that's perfect. It's not whether you win or lose, it's how you place the blame.
Oh, you're so supportive, Jody. We should do this again. I like working with you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a test render here. I'm going to bump the intensity of that light, and then we're just going to call it. There's a couple, and then I want to, if there's any questions, or if we want to look at how we might export some edges, we can do that, but we're getting close to time. So I do want to, if it's okay, because I already rendered this, maybe we could spend the last few minutes and we just look at the one that I did before. So it's sort of, you could see what it looks like if I had more time and wasn't talking this entire time. And by more time, I don't need a ton of more time. I just mean a little bit more time.
Just a little bit, just some words.
Just a little bit. So here's my little render region trick. If I just want to see what's happening over here, I'm just going to select that render region so that then I can just see what's happening. So I press stop, press render. Remember, we've been using interactive this entire time so far, so I haven't even done a full res render. So everything we're seeing is kind of pixelated and noisy, but that's okay because we're just going to trust that it'll get there. So for this sphere light or spotlight, one thing you can do is name them. I can call this headlamp. So just like when I say good practice, you can also purge. So purge anything. So if I put a light in, or if I put materials in that haven't been used, you can purge those. So the other thing I can do here is I want to see sphere light number 2. Oh, that's why. I think it's because when I added a new light, I didn't change the intensity. Do you remember when I dumped that that copy and put it in again?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you know what? I'm going to undo that purged if I can. I didn't want it purged unused. I don't know why it purged a couple of my lights that it shouldn't have. So if I go back and look, oh, that light's still there, but this one's gone. Well, folks.
These are the gremlins that happen whenever you're live streaming.
Yep. I'm going to see make unique. There we go. Now it's doing what I want to do. And I'm going to scale that up, get some ambient light on top of Luke. And then I'm going to set that up, double check that light. This one is called Luke ambient. And then this other sphere light was supposed to be just kind of headlamp ambient. And Luke, I kind of wanted him a little bit more yellow-orange, didn't I? And those were both set. Luke, I'm going to set those both to 250. Save. And render it out. So any other? Okay, there we go. Now you can see it. See that? It's subtle, you know? It's kind of like you can push it. The other thing you can do too is what I kind of talked about, I think before, is that if you're worried about controlling your light settings, you may want to come over here, and when you render, I always render with the material ID channel, and I always render with, or I don't always, but you might want to look into rendering with what's called light mix. So let's stop. This is a great place to stop because we're kind of nearing our time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a non-interactive render, because when you do that, you get denoiser, render channels, and lens effects. And I think those are all things that I think are going to help kind of push this to the sort of next level. So I'm going to enable my lens effects, and I'm going to go ahead and switch from interactive. If I switch over here to my render settings, switch from interactive to, no, I hit the render interactive. I want to switch, turn that off, and I'm going to go ahead and do what's called a static render.
Now, is this run faster, or does it end up actually being slower?
Well, we can chat during this. So it builds a light cache first. So that's like building its RAM. So a little tip is that if you're going to render multiple scenes, you can actually render the light cache out as a file, save it to your desktop, and then what it'll do is each time you do the rendering, that little light cache stage, it won't render. That'll happen instantly because it loads it from a file. So one thing is if you find that the light cache is taking a really long time, just do it once with your material override setting on, save it, load it. So that'll speed things up. Right now we're doing, it depends on the resolution. It's going really fast because I'm rendering a low resolution one, but if I push this up to like 5,000 pixels, yeah, it could take like 30 minutes or something like that. 20 minutes.
No, it doesn't look like it has fog. Is it?
It does have the fog. So this is where first of all, in denoiser, the denoiser smooths out the noise, but in this case, I want to pull it almost like it went too far, it went too much. So I want to pull, I usually kind of take that back to like 75%, 50%. So what it's going to do is it's going to bring back a little bit of that noise. Second thing you can do with lens effects. So lens effects are like pretending that there's a camera angle, like if you're taking it with a camera and you have a light pointing at the camera, like here, little R2 light, that'll like create like a glow, like a halo glow on that, which is kind of cool. So if you have those lens effects on, and then the last thing you can do is, again, we can come over here now that we've done sort of a static render, we can kind of go in and adjust, the exposure, the contrast, highlight burn. We can start to play with some of those settings if we wanted to. One thing is there's no background. You'll notice that there's no the background itself is just blank. If I wanted to just take something like, I don't know, if I just wanted to take a dark color, like in V-Ray, it's kind of cool. If I wanted to, like, I'm just going to set this as the background, and maybe this might not work. So just bear with me. This is kind of fun. In the frame buffer, there's a setting for background. So you could do this in Photoshop, but what I love to do is the fact that you don't have to do this in Photoshop if you don't want to. So I just did a little screenshot. I can open this up, and you can see right now it's got some weird transparency issues. So I maybe would say don't do that, but there is a way that you can insert a background in if you wanted to fill that. to fill that in. But this is where I would do 2 render passes. I would do one with the fog low, and I would do one with the fog high. So let's look at the final product. Can we call it? Are we good? It's 10 till. Let's look at the final rendering in Photoshop, and then let's wrap this puppy up. The reason why I want to show it in Photoshop, because I kind of want to show that I didn't do very much, like as far as like the corrections in Photoshop. I'll just make that full screen. That's okay. So one thing somebody asked me about is the edges. So you can export the edges just as lines. And then what I do is I just take, what I'll do is I'll select everything that's white, and then and delete it in the model so that you just have black edges, and then invert them. So if I turn all this stuff off here and I just click invert, basically what you'd get is you get the black edges, and you can choose whether or not you want to show the hidden geometry. Sometimes I think in rendering, it's kind of cool when you have like the polygons and stuff like that to show the hidden geometry. But basically you just delete the white part of the edge is export and then invert it. And then what you're going to get is if I just, let's say, added a solid color here.
Geez, you could have a different session just on using Photoshop. This is all, last time I used Photoshop, everything was raster.
Yeah, so you can see that the edges here, I've made them white, right? Because of what I wanted to do is I wanted to show the edges on top of a dark scene. But of course, if you were doing a light scene, a happy daytime scene, you might want to do black edges. But that's it. So this is the raw render. If I turn the edges off, this is what the render looked like when I did it myself at midnight. And I showed Luke. The story was a little bit different than the one we're doing today. Unfortunately, Luke had, he didn't survive the crash. So, it's horrible, I know. But basically, the render itself was pretty simple. And then this is where I brought in the fog. So you can see I have 2 different fogs now. So I brought the the fog from the background, and then the fog from the ground plane. And you can see that what I did was just kind of composite those 2 different render passes. And I wish I could do that as one render pass, but you can't. I can't yet. At least I don't know how. And then I export a render ID channel. So in case I needed to select just the water, I could go over here and select just the water, and that makes it really easy to make some color adjustments. And then I also exported just the atmosphere, just in case I wanted to pump that up. And I exported just the reflections, which I actually used as a way to sort of pump up the atmosphere and the reflections. So that was it. Any of the post-production that I did, all I did was just take the colors out of it and then add a little glow around the taillights. That's it. So you can see that not a ton of Photoshop work, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes of Photoshop work.
It looks legit. Now,
legit.
I think had commented wondering, like, so did you, with your original, did it have the light background like the one you just modeled today, or was the background a little darker, or they were wondering how much different it would look with a darker background in the rendering?
Oh, you mean like compared to the white background here?
Yeah.
I can't remember. I have to go back and look at what I did, because what I might have done, I don't know. I might have had 2 HDRIs. You can use 2. You can use one for the background, which is like the sky dome, and that one does not create the light. And then you can use one for the light. So what I might have done is just said, oh, I'm actually going to show. The other thing is I said this as invisible. So if you wanted to go back in, and if you have a dome light or an HDRI image that works with your model, then you just don't do what I did. I turned it invisible. So you just leave that visible, and then we won't get that. It'll render in the scene. So you won't get the sky kind of coming through the way that I did just now. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
I think so.
Yeah. And
this, are you going to,
oops.
So normally we post like the model in the 3D warehouse, but do you guys have a place? Does Eric have a place, or Matt have a place that he might be able to put up any of these different files so people can check them out later? Just in the forum, I guess we could do.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing stuff. I mean, this is just like I said, it's edges, some color corrections, and the render. And that was the render there. The render passes, multiple render passes. So I think as far as the model's concerned, yeah, we can share that with people if they like.
All right. Yeah.
So
I guess Matt can see it because I see he's talking in the forum. So.
Oh, you know what? Hang on. I'm going to check to make sure I didn't miss anything that they're yelling. They're telling me to make sure that I plug. No, I think we're good. So I will leave it at that. I will end by saying that again, I said this in the beginning, but if you weren't there, we are not live streaming next week. We are going to be in Vancouver as a team starting Saturday all the way through next week. We have this thing called 3D Basecamp, so you might have heard us mentioning it and talking about it. It is the most awesome, not just conference ever of all time, but obviously SketchUp event that we put on. It's every 2 years. We were not able to do it in 2020, so we're actually, the anticipation is like double for this one, because we have 4 years leading up to this. So the tips that you see in our skill builders, the tips that you're seeing in the live modeling, you're going to get all of that by people like me, but also people way better than me, which is going to be awesome. And I'm really excited for people that are signed up. And for those that can't, we will try to get you there next time. It'll be in a different city in 2 years from now. So Jody, any other last thoughts, comments, plugs that we want to do before I press my behind the scenes button?
I don't think so. Just check out Matt said he will put this up in the forum. So if you guys want to see it later, then you can go look up the forum thread for this post or for this session.
Yeah, thanks everyone that stuck around for this. I know we bounced around a lot. We covered a lot of stuff. That's what I do. It's kind of how I model. It's fun for me. And I just want to say thanks, because without all of you, I wouldn't be doing this. So I'm going to end it on that, and we'll keep the conversation going either in the forums or in the comments section of the video once it's posted. So cheers.
See you guys.